tradition. It's continuing a tradition and finding our antecedents. Means we have to look back before we can look forward.
You should be putting me out of my misery. Give me some slack in a case of bike check, and I will save us all from a world.
Hey YouTube, hey street and fashion, and let's just say photographers. Getting ready to bring you another video from downtown LA, here in the heart of the fashion district of Los Angeles, California. So just look forward to a few more minutes of a little bit of a special deal for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the photography of two of the great photographers of the 20th and into the 21st century, William Eggleston and Juergen. And do a little bit of a comparison to see like what type of work they do, what their philosophy is on photography, potentially, and some other stuff. So you never know who you might see on the street here. So anyway, getting right back at you in about a second or two.
Okay, hey there, I'm back. We're going to do this with the spotlight on, so I don't have to turn up the lights in the studio too much. My daughter's asleep. So anyway, right now what we're going to do is we're going to do this little discussion between two photographers that have kind of influenced me, and also how they compare. I always liked the idea that there's 3 degrees of separation between everyone in a particular art form. Just like the old saying of 5 degrees separation, 3 degrees separation. So right now, these books, small books, are from, obviously, you've been reading it for the last minute. Juergen, who is a portrait and fashion photographer, who's been around since the 90s, maybe late 80s, early 90s. His work is pretty interesting. He does high contrast color work, typically using film. He just recently started using a digital camera, from what I understand, 5D Mark III, of which he says in a Purple magazine interview with Olivier Zahm, friend of mine and the editor-in-chief of Purple, that when he switched to digital, he doesn't see any reason why not to. He just never did before. And he said that the digitals are maybe a little bit too sharp. But he does campaigns for, big campaigns for Yves Saint Laurent, Marilyn Manson and his ex-wife. You'll see some still life here. This is actually a photograph of someone you all may or may not know. Interestingly enough, there's also Leica 4.2 or 4P, M4P, and it's a thing. I actually have that camera. But this is the photographer William Eggleston, which kind of shows his propensity to, and there's the photographer himself, and Mercedes. But anyway, showing William Eggleston shows a photographer's propensity to understand his influences. Here's Araki, a photographer from Japan that you may or may not know, and I'll go into him either in this interview, this video, or another one. But yeah, this is Juergen taking photographs of some of his various saints of the craft. Very interesting color work, you know. And then of course he does some black and white. This of course is Kurt Cobain, very famous image. And some models. It's kind of a famous model. And others. And his penis. So, anyway, we'll go a little bit more into Juergen Teller maybe at a later date. Interestingly enough, I also have one of the cameras. It's one of the cameras that I use, that Teller uses on a regular basis. And I already mentioned this in our previous video. This Contax G2, and he typically uses it with a flash, and typically with the very special, I like that little flash on this, very special 45 millimeter. I use the 28 because I like the 28 focal length a lot. But yeah, so this is one. It's also a rangefinder in a strange way. It's very different than Leica rangefinders, as it's not really a true rangefinder. What it does is when you put a lens on there, it adjusts itself to, within the mechanism here, to the type of, it's a film camera, of course. Right now I've got some TX, 400 TX, 36 rolls. It's got a little place here. I can turn on the 28 out of 36 that have been shot. It's on its rangefinder. You can do single shot. You can do all the way up to high speed. High speed is very fast on this. And we'll get into this and we'll play with this one a little bit when we're talking about film. Mine's a little scratched up on the back, but I don't care because I'm not going to sell it. So anyway, so that's a camera that Teller uses in a lot of his shots. This little 3-book series, it's actually saddle stitched instead of perfect bound, so it's a really interesting little series. He's got, you know, other images here. You know, he'll do very close-up shots. Very interesting. I mean, you'll see a lot of shots like this in Vice magazine, for instance. He doesn't shoot for them. He's been around a little bit longer. Some landscapes, artwork. But it's all that really sort of high flash, high contrast portraiture. And then he obviously won't be using a flash in landscapes, but he still keeps it very light. And he lets the different colors for the books. There's Vivienne Westwood, portrait of her. You know, he'll also do, you know, some nudes that are not, because that's actually an art piece, probably from antiquity. So it gives you kind of a history, odd portraiture of someone that's, you know, eyes are rolled inside of their head. You know, friends that are usually notable in some ways. So anyway, and then we'll leave that. So anyway, so Juergen Teller as a character. Now this book is kind of special to me. This is William Eggleston's For Now, and it's a book that William Eggleston did in the 70s here in Los Angeles. It covers a nice photo of a girl, I believe his wife, sleeping. Now, you'll notice that Eggleston as well does these wide landscapes, but he also, in most cases, puts person in there. You know, then he has a toilet. Still has that kind of edgy, for lack of a better term, or more inclusive style. So there's a toilet. But, you know, if you notice his colors, he's really identified the yellow of the urine and the green of the walls is identifiable. Sort of the pastels of the, I would assume this is Memphis and not LA, because that's where he's from. But like sort of the colors here are very reminiscent of what Kodachrome did. But at the same time, he's very aware of all of the colors and how they interact together. portraiture of a girl in curlers. Again, William Eggleston for now. And why I wanted to show you this is that Teller, who's primarily now a portrait and fashion photographer, and Eggleston, who is more of an art photographer, very influences a lot of street photographers, are both using kind of a interesting color palette as they go through their different things. There's Eggleston's wife, more personal for William. You can see him up in the corner with his camera, but don't see the camera. And then, as you see, the red and the orange of these two women, and then the greens kind of move in with the browns and the grays. The red and green of that against the brick. There's a nice sort of composition. Again, there's this image where a lot of colors are similar, and they kind of like interact very well together. Even the blue of the TV set. Very boring scenes for Eggleston. Maybe this one isn't quite as boring. It's kind of an interesting shot. I think this was a shot that was actually used by a band. So another thing that's in similarity to Dinosaur Jr. used this as one of their covers of their album. And again, similarly used as something like Juergen Teller would have done, or would do, except he would be commissioned for it. And I think that William probably took the photo and then it was sold. So, you'll see these, again, sort of found color blocking for William. Eggleston also has a really interesting video that he did in black and white with a Sony camera from the 70s. You might want to find it. Can't remember the title of it right off the top of my head. But it's very interesting because you can kind of see that his scene was just very cool. Very, using light in the evening. Wide scene there. So, yeah. So you'll see some of this stuff, and then again these portraitures, but then using the colors as well as the expression on the people's faces, the reflection here in the water for the 66 station. These people with their particular clothing on. I mean, it just works. Emotion, but this red folder that this woman is carrying, I'm assuming that's some sort of protest or something, is really interesting. Even things that like that, drawing your eye to the attention with these things, as well as these lines going to her face. I mean, a master of composition and color, where you take what's called, I guess, the referential monkey kind of semiotic aspect of each thing, and it all kind of works together really well. That almost looks like a Teller portrait. A Teller still life image. So you see how these things work. I would say that Eggleston is really the master at this because he also uses perspective. He uses a lot of different things. And in comparison, if you go back to Juergen Teller's work, he's really keeping things flat. And he's of course like having the subjects hold things and setting up scenes and using nudity and using these other things for the effect. But at the same time, there's another photo of a art guy, using the television in this case with a model down at the bottom of a very interesting television stand, foot and things like that. So in some respects, Juergen Teller is and his newer work, he's now just turned 50 years old recently. His newer work has even more of those feet, see. So a very close reference between Teller and Eggleston. But at the same time, I think that Eggleston has a stronger sense of art perspective and point of view. And this is more like a flat scene, but at the same time, he leave some extra space up the top so you can have the entrance and the other things so you know where you are. They're both equally as good, but you can see how they influence each other a great deal, actually. Now, what I want to talk about too was so William Eggleston is really known for having many different cameras. However, he has a collection of over 200 Leicas. So here's my M7. I also have an M4 too. Again, it's also a rangefinder. I don't know if that's necessarily anything to show difference. Juergen is a German photographer living in London mostly, or living actually outside of London in England. This strap is Eric Kim's Henri strap. It's a really cool strap. It's nice to wrap around your hands. But yeah, so this one has a 40 millimeter Leeds Leica from the CL, this little rubber hood. And it is a true rangefinder in the fact that once you look through the rangefinder itself, you're actually seeing just the image, and you have frame lines like any other Leica that kind of light up through this window. Only the M240 and M246 don't have that window. They have digital frame lines, and I think the M9 Platinum or M9 Titanium, also has that. But yeah, so this is another one of the primary tools for Mr. Eggleston, and also a telling thing that sort of the modern. This was the Contax was supposed to replace the or at least compete with the M6 and the M7. I think the M7 was a response to that because it does have automatic shutter, auto shutter, shutter priority, and or aperture priority, and automatic shutter. Whereas this one's pretty much a fully automatic camera, the Contax G2 and G1. The G2 is a better camera in my opinion, but the G1 is a lot cheaper. You can get them for like $200, and maybe a little bit more with lens. The Leica M7, M6 is about $1,800. M7, you're looking at anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000. It's it is a Leica. It's still brass and solid parts. This one does have auto. It does also keep a battery, and it does have a mode that you can use without the battery, but only at 60 and 1/25th of a second. Whereas the Contax G2 has a number of different things up here. It's auto all the way up to 4,000th of a second. This one only goes to 1,000th of a second without the automatic feature. The automatic feature can go all the way up to 4,000. And the Contax G2 has an auto setting as well as like exposure compensation. The M7 also has is one of the only Leicas, first newer Leica that had actually DX coding, but you can adjust that to where I usually keep my cameras at about with 400 speed film about anywhere between 800 and 1600. Just so I can have some extra shutter speed. I will use a flash with this. I don't actually have a flash for the Contax, but that'll be something I'll get soon enough when I find one. Don't like using eBay that often. But anyway, so that's my kind of discussion about the two William Eggleston and Juergen, two masters and their tools. The Leica M, of course mine is M7, but you can really say any Leica M, and the Contax G2. Tell me what your thoughts are. I'd like to go into a few other things in the next few videos, and maybe give you something else to think about. So anyway, have a good evening. Talk to you soon. This is Bil Brown, and follow me, share me, and make some comments below.